Naruto was a defining anime for an entire generation, myself included. I would say that it's my second anime, and for many it is their first real introduction into the world of anime. And Dragon Ball was my first real anime, but I believe by this point it had transcended beyond the idea of just being an anime. It was a global phenomenon, and while Naruto is definitely no slouch in this regard, it was still very much connected to its Japanese roots in the story inherently, the history of it, the lore, all that kind of stuff. And all this to say that for many people, this story was a gateway. But one thing that I think people misconstrue about the character of Naruto, especially because of how they view him as the main character and his attitude towards things, especially in light of today's political climate, is that he is some sort of a revolutionary. And today I want to debunk this idea by talking about two reasons why this just isn't true. And we're going to tackle it by speaking about first his dream of becoming the Hokage and what he did after he became the Hokage, right? But before we get into it, of course, the usual setup. This isn't it. I'm in my childhood bedroom, so I'm home for the holidays, so I just bear with me. The next 2 or 3 videos are gonna look like this. I hope it's not too much of a bother for you, but I want to thank you guys so much for the support that you've been showing me. We're at like 920 right now, still hoping to hit 1,000 by the end of the year, but reach for the stars, land on the moon. I'm still happy we're at like 920 right now. We were at like 7 something a month ago, but the grind never stops. So please like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. But let's get into the video.
Coming up next, it's Naruto on Cartoon Network.
So if somehow you've been living under a rock and you just didn't know, Naruto's dream and the point of the entire series, is to become the Hokage, the leader of the Hidden Leaf Village, essentially its mayor. And I say that just in case you didn't know, because people oftentimes don't know that there is a fire daimyo who's above Naruto, who he has to report to and listen to, and funds the village. And that is the equivalent of essentially just the president. But recently, I've seen that people have been calling Naruto a revolutionary. Now, while he is a rebel and does cause problems within and throughout the village for attention, at no point during the story does Naruto necessarily fight against the village and its interests. He doesn't even really fight against the corruption of the village itself like that, right? Think Danzo. If not for Sasuke, who I'd argue is the closest thing we actually got to a revolutionary in the story, more on that later, throughout the video, Naruto himself fights to protect the village, meaning that everything about the village, he may acknowledge, the corruption and things like that went on in the village and may try to change those things, yes, but oftentimes asks those who have been wronged by the village to just accept it and, make friends. The whole talk no jutsu thing, right? And one thing I think people forget is that Naruto is framed as the end-all, be-all, most morally correct character throughout the series. This has been shown time and time again with, the talk no jutsu and the way he uses it, which honestly, the only character he doesn't really use talk no jutsu on are the Otsutsuki, and we kind of know why. They're just inherently evil to just be inherently evil. But on his way to becoming the Hokage throughout the story, Naruto experiences discrimination from the village solely for just being the Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tailed Fox, because the history of Naruto if you're watching this video, right? He has to prove himself over and over again just to gain the respect of the village. But this also means that he's always trying to operate within the bounds of the village's rules to uphold the status quo. He doesn't really fight to change much throughout the story. His main objective, as we all know, other than being Hokage, is to bring Sasuke back to the village. And we're going to get on the Sasuke part, because in comparison, there's Sasuke, who by the end of the series wanted to become the Hokage for the sole reason of having the entire world hate him. While this was misguided, his ultimate objective was to eliminate the system's flaws and protect others from undergoing the same fate as his brother Itachi had done. This is the mark of a revolutionary. He's trying to take down the current government, which he himself sees as corrupt. In my opinion, he isn't necessarily wrong, and not to discredit Naruto's experiences as a Jinchuriki and just being an orphan, but let's be honest, if Minato and Kushina were still alive, none of the things that happened to Naruto and none of the ways that the people of the village treated him would have happened, especially since everyone loved Minato and Kushina. The only people in the village who would actually still experience discrimination are the Uchiha clan. Naruto's dream is acknowledged and accepted by everyone within the village. Sasuke's goal until he was defeated by Naruto was to change the village's corrupt systems or destroy it trying to do that. And this is obviously after finding out, about Itachi's story and all that kind of stuff. And he does misconstrue it and misinterpret it. Is it what Itachi wanted? No. But it is the closest thing we get to a revolutionary throughout the entire story. And to drive home this point, I would like to discuss Naruto's time spent as the actual Hokage.
Coming up next, Naruto on Cartoon Network.
So after Naruto became Hokage, there is absolutely no doubt that he brought about the most peaceful times that the 5 great ninja villages have ever known. But if we are being honest with ourselves here, while yes, Naruto has established proper connections between each village, peace is maintained mainly due to the fact that there is a common threat in the Otsutsuki clan against the entire world. And I don't know if you know, but if you have a common enemy, you kind of work together and you don't really focus on fussing between each other. And I mean, who's gonna fight the living chakra nukes that is Naruto and Sasuke? Who are the villagers gonna send to actually win? The closest they got is Killer Bee, and I'm sorry, I love Killer Bee. Killer Bee is not taking on both of those boys at the same time, bro. Let's keep it a spade, bro. Let's call a ban a ban. And I don't know if you guys remember, but during OG Naruto and Shippuden, there was the village elders, and somehow they are still alive, and even worse, they actually still hold their positions of power within the village, as we see once Naruto assumes the role of Hokage. And I don't know if you remember, but these guys have been in this position since Hiruzen's time. Maybe even, yeah, honestly, maybe even before that. I'm not 100% sure, but I know that they've been there since Hiruzen's been the Hokage, right? You remember them, the elders who supported Danzo, and his actions with the root and all the corruption he did. The ones who allowed the entire village to blame Naruto for the Nine Tails attack. Again, that was the thing that Danzo did, and they're just like, yeah, we're cool with that. Let that happen, unite them against the one kid. The ones who okayed the slaughter of the Uchiha clan, those guys. The ones who okayed the idea of Danzo becoming the temporary Hokage, those guys. They were very aware of who Danzo was. They were very aware of what he wanted and, his thirst for power and all that kind of stuff and what he would do with it. But yeah, those guys. And guess what? Under Naruto's tenure as Hokage, they were still allowed to make decisions about the village's future. And again, they've been in power since Hiruzen's time. This is 15 years after Shippuden. Think about that, bro. That is crazy to think that they're still in power, bro. It's like, it's just America. It's just America. It's modern day government, bro. But Naruto was, if Naruto was the revolutionary that people claim that he was, you would think the first thing he would do is to remove the most corrupt people who are still in power within the village, because they've shown time and time again that they are corrupt. Is it in the best interest of the village? Yes, but at the same time, it's oftentimes backfired to hurt the village. But no, he allows them to stay, and they even advise him, because I don't know if you remember, but those two are pretty much the only people the Hokage has to answer to in the village. And if you want to argue about checks and balances and how this prevents the Hokage from becoming dictators and things like that, which I do agree with, okay, that's a very good point to bring up. Tsunade and Kakashi are right there. They were Hokage, and they know what it takes to run the village. Tsunade mostly experienced the village in a time of turmoil. That's her entire life of experience. I mean, Kakashi's a kid, grew up with the village in a time of turmoil, and then he saw it in peace and knew what it took to keep it, in those things. And I'm just thinking, like, why not appoint them to that position? And another thing I think people often overlook is that Naruto pretty much idolizes all the previous Hokage. He sees them as these legendary heroes, as we've seen him act within the fourth great, Shinobi War. And at no point does he acknowledge the valid criticism that people like Sasuke would have for somebody like Tobirama, who had the Uchiha segregated from the village. And then there was Minato, who I love, my favorite character, but did absolutely nothing to fix this. And then there was Hiruzen himself, who actually stood by while the Uchihas were exterminated by a child who was an Uchiha. Just things like that. And while we all know Naruto does have the best interests of everyone at heart, he doesn't really do anything to correct the wrongs of the past. He doesn't try to remove any past corruption that may cause future corruption. The village elders are a prime example. They're still in their positions, which is honestly just the biggest indicator in my opinion. He operates within the bounds of the village's rules and always will. think of somebody like Eren Yeager or even Dragon from One Piece. I know I bring up One Piece on this channel a lot. I love One Piece, but they operate outside of the law to bring about change. Eren straight up becomes a genocidal maniac to get peace for the people of Paradis Island. And while I don't agree with his method, he's definitely much more of a revolutionary than Naruto is. And did that kind of backfire? Is it a cyclical thing? Sure, yes. But while in the Naruto world, in my opinion, it does have the ability to facilitate a complex political story, it doesn't really do a good job of exploring it. Because at the end of the day, Naruto, you know, he's just trying to get his dream achieved. You know, he's living the idea of wanting to become the Hokage just to become acknowledged by the village is inherently a very nationalistic one through and through. And you know, there's nothing inherently wrong with this, but it is his job to, while he has brought about change within the village, he's ushered the village in an era of peace. As I've said, it's mostly because there's a common enemy within the Otsutsuki. And you know, there's no infighting, but there's also no more Uchiha in the village, so there's no more infighting to have. It's just things like that why I can't really consider Naruto to be a revolutionary to the same aspect of somebody like, I wouldn't even say Luffy's a revolutionary. I think he just ends up doing things of that nature just because of his attitude towards things and his fight against oppression. And while Naruto doesn't support oppression, he doesn't necessarily fight against it, if you understand what I'm trying to say. But that is the video, and as usual, you know, I want to thank you guys so much for the support that you've been showing me. You guys are really helping me make my dreams come true. I can't express that enough. You know, I really want to thank you guys so much. It's just, it's crazy to me that you guys have been supporting the videos. I'm really happy that I've really found a purpose of this. But you know, please go ahead, continue liking, subbing, commenting what you guys think. You know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe Naruto is a revolutionary in some way. There's definitely things that he did, but I wouldn't outright call him a revolutionist. But you know, as usual, I love you guys. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.